Real Dads Lead. And welcome to another episode of Real Dads Lead. I'm your host, Dwayne Smith, and next to me is Mr. Matt Hamilton, your co-host. How are you doing today, Matt?
I'm doing great.
Doing well. How was your weekend?
It was really good.
Really good.
Yeah.
So I mentioned, because I did a video on the Blind movie, and then I mentioned on there that you had seen it too, because you had shot me a text, said that you went to see it. Who'd you go see it with?
Did you see it the same day? It was the same day, right?
It must have been the same day. I saw it that morning. I did an afternoon matinee.
Okay. Yeah, I saw it I went just with my older son.
Oh, okay.
But then we ended up we ran into some other friends there.
Oh, while you were there. Yeah. But was it a place where you had assigned seatings, or?
It was at Crosswoods. It is assigned. You have to choose your seats.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't sit with your friends that you met.
No.
Yeah. What were your initial thoughts, and then what were Kai's thoughts?
We both loved the movie.
Did you?
Yeah, it really was. It was a really well done movie. It wasn't exactly as I expected it to be, like the whole thing kind of taking place from the blind.
Oh yeah.
But I thought they just did a great job capturing his life from beginning to end. I just loved seeing that progression from childhood all the way through coming to Christ, and the dramatic change, that was experienced. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah. What did Kai think?
He loved it as well.
Yeah.
He's a big fan of Sound of Freedom, Jesus Revolution, and now The Blind. Okay. I'm just really excited because there's a lot of solid, well done Christian movies coming out.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking at the stats on it, and it's done fairly well. Like the first night it came out, it was number one gross moneymaker.
Really?
And then the second night it dropped down to number 6.
Okay.
The third moved up to number 5. Right. So I don't know exactly what the budget was for it. I don't know what the budget was for it, but it was. I'm hoping that they made their money back. And,
I mean, Duck Dynasty is truly that. It's a dynasty. It's like 11 episodes. I think I heard on the Jordan Peterson podcast the other day. It's been on forever. So many people know it, as seasons, well as buy their products. And so that's not surprising. I hope it does really, really well. Yeah. I mean, it fits really nicely with this particular podcast because it's all about, primarily it was about Christ.
And a redemption of,
But secondarily, it was about what is a man? And there was even basically that question at 3 different points through the movie, like who's a man? And the very last time that question was
no spoilers. We're not trying to give away any spoilers.
Yeah, he could answer it in the best of ways, and it was fantastic. I loved it.
Yeah, that's good. But you're right, because this chapter is about stepping up and resisting temptation. And there was a point where in the movie in his life and in most people's lives, there was a point where you're not resisting temptation. And that's generally the boy in the adolescent phase and the teen phase. And when you're becoming a man, you need to be able to resist temptation.
Right.
But even at your age, my age, our parents' age,
temptation doesn't go away.
Yeah, temptations don't go away. So, and in general, and we've talked about it many times on several different podcasts, the biggest temptation for men is in the sexual area. So this chapter wasn't talking about necessarily pornography, but just the idea of resisting the temptation
in
general, and being able to resist not the adulterous woman necessarily, but
in this case it was.
Yeah. Was it? Was she adulterous? She was trying to be, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we'll get into that as we go.
Yeah, but as you were saying, it fits in perfectly with the movie because he has to go through a lot of the temptation himself. There's that very real battle that this is not a spoiler. It's kind of obvious. Of course, he eventually overcomes it because of what Christ has accomplished in his life.
Yeah.
So highly recommend the movie for anybody and everybody.
Yeah.
And we had previewed it for the rest of our family. I totally think this is something that certainly any teen can see. no matter the gender, I would say. And I think, I have a 12-year-old daughter, almost 12-year-old. I think she's probably going to watch it, and it will be fine. Yeah. There's nothing.
There's a couple cuss words, just barely. Yeah, just
I didn't
a couple.
Notice that, and I typically do.
Yeah, and there's alcohol use and tobacco use.
Right, and there's some aggression that's shown. And as far as like sexual stuff, there's. They did a
very good job of implying it without doing anything, because you're like, yeah, I know what that guy's thinking.
Right. Yeah. So, wholehearted recommendation.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. So, we are looking at chapter. What chapter is this?
Chapter
15?
16.
16.
Yeah.
Chapter 16 in the Stepping Up, A Call to Courageous Manhood by Dennis Rainey. And this chapter was called The Courage to Resist Temptation. Yeah. So first quote was Martin Luther King, right?
That's right. Martin
Jr.
Luther King Jr. Here's what it is. Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? And conscience asks the question, is it right?
Yeah, it's pretty good. It seems like we do go through each of those, depending on where you are mature-wise and your probity. You can. Is there a fear factor there?
Cowardice.
So is it safe? Yeah. Is this politically correct? Is this something that I'm going to offend somebody with or whatever? Is it going to help me out? The vanity, is this make me more popular, make me look good? Yeah. And then, but conscious, which in our case, and in believers' case, it should be the Spirit of God that's living in you. Is it right? Ask the question: is this right?
Right. And if the answer to that question is yes, then it doesn't matter if it's safe. It doesn't matter if it's politic. It doesn't matter if it's popular. You just do it.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
it's pretty good. Pretty good.
So the whole chapter is essentially about this problem, this epidemic that exists in the culture today, where men are straddling this step between adolescence and manhood. And the biggest time in their lives where they're straddling that is the actual biological time between adolescence and physical manhood. But as you pointed out, you can kind of find yourself returning to that temptation to straddle both at different periods in your life.
Yeah.
It's definitely for the young, but somebody in their 50s, 60s, 40s, whatever it might be, they can find themselves maybe under intense pressure where they are tempted to kind of fall back into that adolescent, irresponsible kind of life,
right.
As opposed to living lives of probity or integrity as husbands, fathers in the workplace.
Yeah. So why don't we just kind of recount the story? I want you to recount that, and then we can expound on that just a little bit.
Yeah. So the story essentially was about a guy named Dan, a friend of Dennis Rainey's, and he was a pastor, and by all measures outside of himself, very successful at being a pastor and a husband and a father. In fact, he traveled the country, was paid by people to come in and teach how to have a good marriage. Right.
Exactly.
But he found himself under intense pressure and overwhelmed, and that put him in a weak place. And after missing a high school reunion, his former girlfriend from high school contacted him, said she missed seeing him there, and asked if they could get together. And he agreed to get together. But wisely, at first, he takes his wife with him.
Probably thinking about, these are some of the things that I teach.
Exactly. Yeah. We talked about this on our last podcast, I think, or maybe it was the one before that. We talked about this practice of it was the last podcast, protecting your marriage by living above reproach. Not being in a room with another woman,
right,
or in a car with another woman that's not your wife. These kinds of practices. So he probably taught that same thing, and he took his own advice here.
Yep.
When his wife went to the bathroom, the woman made some advances. When she came back, it stopped.
Yeah.
But it seems like it got some things, some feelings stirred up there.
Yeah.
eventually she contacted him again, and they set a date to meet together when he was traveling, and she was going to be in the same city. So his wife wasn't going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And for months, it said, the Holy Spirit, every time he'd open his Bible, he couldn't focus. He couldn't really get anything done. All he heard was, don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And he finally built up enough courage to tell his accountability partner, whom he lovingly dubbed his sparring partner, what had been going on. And again, lovingly but firmly, his accountability partner told him that he was an idiot. and he made him this. I mean, this is
true accountability partner,
but also just true friendship.
Yeah, right.
True brotherly love right here. He said, we're not getting up from this table until you call that woman right now and call off the date.
Mm-hmm.
And so he did. He called her right there, apologized to her for essentially leading her on, said he was happily married and it wasn't appropriate for them to be meeting or even talking any longer. So he completely burnt that bridge.
Right.
But it didn't stop there. His friend said, you got to do one more thing to make sure this doesn't happen again. You got to call your wife and you got to tell her everything that's happened.
Yeah.
And he did. I mean, can you imagine how humbling that would be? She had some hunches that it was happening already. Mm-hmm. And in the end, she said that she was proud to be married to a man who was humble enough to be accountable to other men.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a beautiful thing. That accountability that he had in place for years.
Right.
Provided him some solid protection in this one moment. Mm-hmm. So in the end, he chose fidelity. He chose faithfulness, even though in his heart, he had been wrestling with that for some time. Mm-hmm. He was able to walk away from that unscathed.
Yeah. Right.
But that's not so for many, many men.
Yeah. So just in this spitballing, I mean, we haven't talked about this at all, but just he's not alone. I think most men have had thoughts, not necessarily of, cheating or anything like that, but, exploring an interest. And I was just, as you were talking and when I was reading that story, I was thinking, why, what would make a man do this? What is it? What was it about the lady that sparked his interest? And they talked about it in the book a little bit that she was attractive, and he noticed right away and said something about his wife giving him a little bump, like, whoa. But then I think in most cases it's just that I've talked to several different men who have had not struggles necessarily, but they know that is one of their temptations. Mm-hmm. They know this is a weakness of theirs, and it wasn't really anything about trying to, satisfy desire. It's more or less that the one thing that they wanted to satisfy, or the thing that they found attractive, was the idea of conquering, to being able to
interesting,
be able to man, if I could attract this woman, it's a feat. It's and I've talked to several men who have that,
like an "I still got it" kind of a.
That's yes, yeah. I still got it, and it is I don't know. I was just thinking when she's in the story when the wife went to the bathroom, and you said that there was a little bit more flirting, or and it sparked something in him. It had to be, I still got it, or this is an attractive lady who's interested in me, and it's a good feeling.
Right. Yeah.
It's a good feeling to have that, and
chemically speaking, we know that endorphins are activated in something like that. In the same way that when you eat certain foods, or with pornography, when you see certain images, chemically something's happening inside of you.
Right.
He had to be experiencing that very same thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of euphoric.
It's a euphoric feeling. Right. Yeah. I think so too. So I'm sure there are dads out there who are totally committed, but that still can be
as he was. That's the point of the story.
Right,
that's why
right,
he's
right.
such kind of a perfect example.
Yeah.
You know, this guy, I mean, he's got a solid marriage. He's a solid father. He's a solid pastor. He's teaching people about how to be those things.
Yeah.
And then in a moment of weakness, he is severely tempted and almost goes through with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And even then he could, like, I think it's said in the chapter that, or maybe you were saying that, he's rationalized. You can rationalize. It's innocent, but it is what Dennis would say, it's a step down. You're not stepping up, you're stepping down. And that step down can lead to another step down. And that step down can lead to another step down. And the next thing you know, you're in a place you never thought you'd be again.
Yeah. He said in closing, that we are all one slippery step away from losing it all. Years of integrity and fidelity and respectability. One slippery step away.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wisdom in that. There's a lot of wisdom and security in recognizing that, there's this narrow path, that I'm called to walk on, and off either side is danger, and if it's just one slippery step off and I'm falling, it's helpful to remember on a daily basis that you will be tempted, and that if you fall into that temptation, it's just going to wreak havoc into your life.
Right.
So it's just a good thing to keep before your mind.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, I've shared my story on this podcast and been there. I've been on a slippery slope, and I've tumbled and fell and slide and been to the depths. So the other positive thing is, not only did his accountability partner, his sparring partner, help him to resist that temptation, but he's also there, like, if there was some succumb to temptation, you need a partner also willing to help you, guide you back up the steps, in that. So do you have a sparring partner yourself?
I do not.
You do not?
I mean, I have at different points in my life.
Not a one.
Currently, I do not.
Like a one. I mean, I know you share stuff with me sometimes, and
yeah, that's more what it is. Like, I'm typically very open with friends in my life. I don't have one specific one that I meet, and right now that works. I'm typically very open and forward about the things that I'm struggling with or dealing with men that I trust.
Right.
Kind of serves the same purpose, but it is helpful, I think, at certain times or for certain personalities to have one person that they're meeting with every week. And you do have an accountability partner, right? Or is it every other week?
Every other week.
Every other week.
Yeah. And that is, I mean, the one I went to the movies with, Pastor Tim. So we, meet every other week and keep each other accountable. So.
Yeah. And something that's beautiful about the accountability partner that he talks about in the book is that it was very clear he wasn't afraid to actually spar. I think that's a very helpful picture, an accurate picture. He's not your typical accountability partner, in my experience, where they're kind of afraid. Like, should I say this to you or should I not say it to you? No, there was apparently, maybe it was a growing understanding, or maybe they laid it out at the very beginning, this understanding that if I am in the wrong, I need you, and I'm expecting you to spar with me. I'm expecting you to call me out on that, because we all know that when we start to get caught up in temptation or sin, we start to put our blinders on, and we can't really see reality as it is. So we need someone to basically step up and smack those blinders off our face and say, you're being an idiot. And ask us to do the hard things like he did in the book. So if you're going to find an accountability partner, if you don't have one right now, you don't make sure that that's a requirement, right? Or if you already have one, sit down and have your conversation in your next meeting and say, look, this is what's necessary. Without that, really, this is a waste of time.
Yeah, exactly.
It really is.
Yeah, you're just my friend.
Right.
And exactly. Well, let's take a quick break and I have some other stuff.
Sounds good.
Okay, so, and I think it's good to have an accountability sparring partner that is like a peer or a mentor type thing. as a dad, what kind of accountability aspects? I mean, does that still translate, or is there a different type of?
You mean to your kids?
Yeah. Is there a different type of relationship they probably need to have somebody who's their own age to be their accountability partner? Or
I mean, at the very least, and I don't mean to say that it's insufficient either, but I think that there should be the father-son accountability going on. We've not called it
that's
that.
only one direction.
No, I think
Both
I think it can be both. Yeah, especially as they get older.
Yeah.
And we should be humble enough where it's like, well, you're upset at me, Dad, for doing this, but at the same time, like, it was really hard not to talk to you that way because you were screaming at me.
Yeah,
you were yelling at me. It would take a whole lot of self-control at that point and humility to say, you're right, I lost control there. And just in case anybody's wondering if that's okay or not, fruit of the spirit is self-control. So when we allow our anger to get the best of us, even if the child is wrong, right? They need correction, but that doesn't justify you responding with a lack of self-control.
Yeah.
Right. So you need to apologize in that situation. And there may be a time where your son has picked up on, well, you tell me to be controlled, but here you weren't being controlled. And so it's really hard for me not to be controlled. It's just this chain reaction, because that's how things work. It doesn't justify anyone involved, but it does mean that both need to apologize there. So I think it can work something like that.
Yeah.
But I was definitely thinking more in line of temptation here, knowing that the ability to resist temptation is really small, or maybe I want to say it hasn't had time to mature in your adolescent years. And so any dad is naive or ignorant if he thinks that his boys aren't being tempted in these ways. No matter how good of a job he's being a protector, as we talked about last week, your boys are being exposed to those things. And so having conversations about them, asking them point blank, especially if you know that they've struggled with these things in the past, about things like pornography or masturbation or temptation with their girlfriend, whatever phase they're in, I think you got to ask those questions.
Yeah.
If they want to have, and I think it's probably a good idea as they start to approach leaving your home, that they start to have an accountability partner their own age as well, or someone slightly older, someone in college or a youth leader, something like that. I think that's important because, especially if they move away when they leave your home, if you're their only accountability partner or sparring partner, there's going to be a problem, right? There's going to be a problem. But if they have that habit already built in where, yes, I'm accountable to my dad and we have these conversations, but I've also been for the last couple of years accountable to somebody else, right, they're more inclined to find someone wherever they move.
So you would suggest
I would suggest both as they get older.
Yeah, but suggest encouraging that in your kids, that to find an accountability partner.
And I want to say, I'll be real honest. I hate the phrase accountability partner.
Okay.
I hate it. I've always hated it because I feel like there's no grit in it whatsoever. And as I mentioned before, my experience with accountability, it's like sometimes I go through it, I'm sitting with somebody and I walk away like that was a complete waste of time.
Okay.
I despise it. And I've seen so many people kind of flutter around a topic and they don't really talk about what needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
So I actually am considering, now that we've listened to this podcast, whenever I encourage or teach about the concept of accountability, calling it sparring. I think that's so much better. There's essentially this wrestling that's going on between you two. It's like this spiritual, we're going to lock shoulders here, and we're going to test one another, and we're going to see what needs to be gotten out of
that's the whole purpose of sparring, is to prepare you for the battle, fight. The actual fight.
I love it.
I like that too. It was pretty interesting because in my church, we've been going through 1 Samuel, and the whole idea, the story of Eli and his sons, and where Eli did not keep his sons accountable, and they were basically, what was his name? Phineas, and I can't remember.
It was Ferb.
Not Ferb. Phineas and Ferb. It's Phineas and something. But they were, I mean, just basically really,
they were sleeping with women at the tent of the Lord, etc.
Yeah,
it was bad news.
Yeah,
and the Lord killed them.
Eli didn't do anything about it. He just, and we talked about that last week. You know, the courage to protect. He was just like, you know, what can I do? Or it's easier just to do nothing.
Right.
You know, that idea. So I thought about that after we had our other podcast, and I thought, oh man, I should have brought that up, but it still fits into this
and
one
maybe
too.
Something else to mention about that, just to drive it home for the dads in the audience and ourselves included, is that his sons weren't the only ones judged by the Lord in that situation. He was also judged.
He was judged too.
Because in the end, he was a very large man, which maybe be kind of a picture of his laziness as a father. And he fell over backwards, and I think he broke his neck and died. And it was all kind of part of God's judgment on this family.
Yeah.
His sons failed in great ways. He had them killed. The father, though, who was responsible to raise those sons and did such a terrible job at it, which led to the demise of so many other people, that this chain reaction effect. So many people were corrupted through his two sons. Because of that, the Lord also took his life.
Yeah.
Some heavy stuff.
Very heavy. I was also listening to a podcast called The Order of Man. It was one that was like one of his videos that was like 4 years old. But he had talked a little bit about the humility. He needed to talk to his son about something, and he got his son into the car and said, I need to talk to you about something. And said that the son braced himself, but he went in and apologized for the outburst of anger and things like the dad did.
Okay.
And then it was really interesting that the son said, you know, Dad, there's times when I'm a knucklehead and I deserve those outbursts. And the dad's like, that still doesn't excuse me from my part. But they both apologized to each other. But he said, from right then on, our relationship changed. I mean, it was a stronger bond. And so the idea of necessarily sparring, that's a great, now it doesn't feel like awkward being accountable to your kid, but if you're sparring and preparing each other, then it's a pretty good picture of it. It changes the relationship. It strengthens it. Strengthens the bond. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that. I love that image.
So what was next on there? What were some of his ending comments? That was a story. That was pretty much the whole chapter, wasn't it?
It was pretty much the whole chapter. I mean, he had, before the story, he had mentioned, I think this might be helpful, that some of the ways that we kind of straddle that line, or when we're tempted to straddle that line, is when we feel like we've fallen out of love with our spouse, which is at its base a worldly concept anyway. You know, this idea of falling in love and then being able to fall out of love, and how all of marriage, you know, if it's a good marriage and if you should stay on it, then it's going to be producing this good feeling in you all the time. It's just a lie. It's not true.
Right.
Reality.
That's the storybook, and that's the Hollywood picture,
the Hallmark picture.
You see, you know, in the commercials and everything, the couples are always smiling, and they're always
And in a story saturated with media, whether it's through love stories in book form or in movie form, or, you know, shorts on YouTube or Instagram, that all have that same message. It's impossible, essentially, for someone not to grow up with that temptation of thought, right? I need to fall in love, and it needs to be perfect. And if it doesn't end up being perfect, then somehow I missed the boat. You know, I misjudged, and I got to get out, and I got to try to find that other person. Right? That's not a biblical picture of love. You know, I mean, marriage is meant to be this this great sanctifier in our lives. You know, biblically speaking, you've got two people who are committing to love one another. I mean, in countless cultures throughout history and even sometime today, there's arranged marriages. You're trusting wiser people in your life to bring you together, but you're coming together with that same purpose. I'm going to commit to love you no matter what. And in a Christian marriage, God is going to use the sinfulness of that other person and the sinfulness that comes out in your own self during that marriage as an opportunity to make you more holy. Right. Every time my old man comes up in marriage, it's an opportunity for me to slay him where he stands, right? To put him to death, to humble myself and to choose to love and serve this person anyway. And every time I choose to do that, I'm becoming more like Christ, which is our sanctification. That's a biblical picture of marriage, right? Times are going to get hard. You don't see those times as a opportunity to get out, but rather to dig your feet in and learn your lesson and grow to be the man that God made you to be.
Yeah.
That's biblical marriage.
Yeah.
So the other thing that he said was that we can often succumb. This is the story. Succumb to the charm of a woman that's not our wife. This is the picture in Proverbs. She seduces with her lips. Her lips drip with honey. She's very cunning with her words, and not to mention the way that she looks. So we can easily be seduced by that and drawn away.
Yeah.
And the list could go on and on and on.
Right.
It'd be interesting actually to see if some of the men wanted to drop in the comments what has really tempted them, or what has nearly led them away. It's humbling to post those things, but it's also I think necessary because it can really encourage other men.
Yeah.
Sometimes as men, we think that we're just uniquely evil, or we're unique in our temptation. And so we don't want to say it because we think other people will think less of us.
Yeah.
But the reality is those men are being tempted in similar ways all the time.
Yeah.
It's helpful to know those things. The other thing that he mentions though, at the very end, he says that Satan is a master angler, and he always knows the exact kind of bait that will lead us astray, right? On an individual basis, these demonic forces.
Yeah.
It makes me think of what's the book, the C.S. Lewis book? It is Screw Tape Letters, where you've got this senior tempter or demon instructing a younger tempter demon in how to do his job, right? They've each got these human assignments, and their job is to study them intimately so that they know exactly what the best bait will be to put in front of them in any given situation, or for any particular sin that this demon wants them to commit, right? Yeah. So we need to understand that we have this, like we said, we have this this enemy that is out to get us. And every day that we wake up, every night that we go to bed at night, we need to be aware that that enemy is there, and we need to be in humble dependence upon the Lord, not be naive, put on our armor and be ready to resist that temptation.
Right. Yeah. And I mentioned that it's not just the bait. I mean, it's easy to, that's what he talked about in the book. He said, I had another friend from church. He said, shiny things that just catch your attention. And sometimes that's what bait is. Some of the lures, they just have a little bit of something that's a little shiny. They catch your attention. But the enemy not only knows what kind of bait tempts you, but also knows the conditions that you might be in. So my brother decided to move to Alaska for the summer and be a professional angler and take people out on rafts and do fishing for salmon, king salmon. So it was interesting listening to him talk about how to catch these king salmon. And he had said that the salmon are not, when they're coming through, they're not hungry. So it's not some kind of thing that you're not putting out lures that will tempt them to eat.
Interesting.
They put out little eggs, salmon eggs out, and they're not exactly sure what they're doing, reason wise, but they theorize that they're either protecting the eggs So they go and put them in their mouths to protect them, or they are trying to get rid of their competition. The males get rid of their competition. So they're grabbing them to eat them to like spur on their own personal thing. But it was very interesting to me, like, what? Yeah. It's not like they're hungry during that time. And then there's a certain time we got to go out early, So as a fisherman, you find, okay, this is the best conditions for the fish. This bait is what lures them. This time of the night, this temperature of the water, all kinds of different things that could lead to that temptation. And I find that in my life, the same kind of temptations. You find out where you're the weakest, and it could be, for me, sometimes it's when all of my kids were home or my whole family's around, and then they all leave, and there's a void, and it's just like I'm alone at this time, and it's like that's when temptation hits, And those are some of the things that you tell your accountability partner. So I mean, my accountability partners sparring partners, know, like, okay, to ask me, how you doing now that everybody's gone, and just to keep me level-headed during those times. Yeah. So
I love that analogy. And I feel like fishing in general, that is the analogy that just keeps on giving. Jesus used it, and we just continue to find different little lessons out of it. But the fact that, and I'm no professional angler by any means, but some of the stuff I think that I've learned about this is that in general, fish bite when the water's cooler, or otherwise when it's darker out, right? It's dusk, it's just before dawn, or it's at nighttime, and of course that darkness can represent a period of isolation in our lives, or some dark time that we're going through, like what you said, when we're alone. I think that they also are more prone to bite in poor weather, like rain or during storms, things like that, and Satan often tempts us, when we're down, when we're going through some kind of a trial. And so being aware of his methods is a key part in being able to overcome. It's this idea of, if you knew when the thief was going to break into your house at night, you'd be there ready to make sure he doesn't get in.
Right.
And if you know that Satan attacks under these conditions, then you can stand ready to make sure he doesn't get in. It's that same concept there.
And another thing, when we're talking about the father-son or father-daughter relationship, those are also things that you can see, that the conditions are there, whether your son or daughter has gone through a breakup, or if they're having some rocky times with friends at
or
home,
school,
or
sports team. Anytime they're down.
And you can see that those kind of, the conditions. Right. So those are times to step in and say, hey, this is probably you. And I've told people this. I've told people who have been in certain situations, like especially if they've gotten something like a promotion or gotten something that's good, it's like, this is one of those times where you might just feel like you're going to get attacked because some things are going well for you right now.
Yeah.
Be aware of it. I remember telling my one son once he decided to go get baptized, and he got baptized. I told him after he was baptized, hey, everything's not going to be guns, just roses and sunshine and roses right now. This is when Satan's really actually going to come after you. So to test you. So be aware.
I heard you say kind of three basic categories or times when we might be tempted. One was when we are despairing over something, or we're overwhelmed, we're down about something, something's not going right. So kind of a dark period in our lives. The other one was when we are doing something for the Lord, like truly doing something for the Lord, such as baptism or some work. Satan obviously doesn't want that to continue to go well, and he wants to make you fall, because often when the man falls, the ministry falls, right? But the third one was and this is something I think we don't often think about. When something's going well in our life, such as a promotion, we might be tempted to pride, or something similar, and we end up letting down our guard, or we're so excited about it that we end up letting down our guard. And he attacks at that point as well, so maintaining a grounding in who God is, right, and in his faithfulness, and maintaining humility before him, and maintaining alertness. So over and over again in the New Testament, the various authors, whether it's Jesus speaking or Paul writing, Peter writing, they're exhorting us to watchfulness. They're exhorting us to stay alert or to stay awake, because we are so easily overtaken by the enemy if we are otherwise.
Yeah. Love it. Anything else you had?
No, I think that's it. It's a good chapter.
Yeah, very good chapter. So if you guys have any comments, please leave those in there. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed, like, and make those comments. It helps our channel to grow. So
yeah, I'd love to hear in the comments a couple of things. Well, maybe I'll just prioritize. The one is I'd love to hear from different men what you have found effective in resisting temptation, because I have found that I might share with you what has helped me resist temptation, and it might help you, but it doesn't help this guy over here as much. So again, this is the beauty of community here. So if you could drop that in the comments, I think that without a doubt, other men are going to benefit from it.
Yeah. And I would encourage you, if you do not have a sparring partner, accountability partner, sparring partner, or if you have another phrase for it that you may have that you want to share with us, I would encourage you to get one. And so that'd be my challenge to you too, Matt. If you get somewhere you're meeting on a regular basis. I mean, I know you see me every day, so we generally talk, but and I do try and keep you accountable. I'm not afraid to tell you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
But maybe someone your own age,
Bro, at this point, it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't matter. All right. Well, thanks for watching this episode. And always remember that real dads lead